Hi, I'm Dave Epstein. Welcome to this edition of Growing Wisdom. Today we're talking container gardening. Our video today is sponsored by Lowe's. Lowe's gave me a gift certificate and I went out and got a lot of containers. I got some soil, we got different plants, I got some fertilizer, and we're going to talk about some of the best practices in order to grow successful containers. Let's look at some different types of containers, some of the things I like about them and some of the things I don't like. The first container I want to talk about are these new felt containers. This container is a Root Farm felt garden pot. I love these things. I started using them a few years ago. They really take quite a bit of soil. Now there's all sorts of different sizes. The felt containers that are shallower you can use for things like lettuces, or perhaps you want to do microgreens or anything that doesn't need a deep root system. These felt containers here that are a little bit deeper, you could grow almost anything from tomatoes to zucchini to cucumbers. I've even got a couple of these with different types of beans. The advantage of the felt containers is that they have great aeration, so the roots seem really happy. One of the disadvantages of these felt containers is that they tend to dry out pretty quickly because there's so much aeration. Next, let's take a look at clay containers. These have been around a long time, tried and true, sturdy, beautiful, natural. One of the things I really like about them, again, is that they are porous, so good air circulation. I love growing rosemary plants in these. You can see I've got a nice rosemary plant in this particular container. Always remember with these containers, they usually will come with a little hole. That's your drainage hole. And what I like to do is just put a rock or some old pieces of broken pot right in there. By putting that in over the hole, you'll allow the drainage, but you won't allow the soil to come out through the hole. That's also very important. But if you're growing succulents or something that likes it on the drier side, clay containers are my choice. Let's take a look at the wooden container. This is a cedar garden barrel planter. I actually like it so much that instead of putting soil in it, I think I'm going to use it just as the outside container for a couple of other containers. You could use soil in it. A couple of caveats on this particular variety. Number one, if you look in here, you can see that there's a bit of a gap. So I'd have to put an old piece of pot or maybe some landscape fabric so that the soil doesn't come through the bottom of this. One of the disadvantages of wooden containers, of course, is that they're wood. They're going to rot eventually. Last type of container I want to talk about are these self-watering containers. Now these are really great for, number one, if you have plants with a heavy water demand, you can get a lot of water in there and it makes for less frequent watering. Also, if you're just somebody that completely forgets about watering, you can have more success with these containers. So I got two of these. This one, this big black one, I'm really impressed with. This is by a company called Mayne. It's sturdy, it's heavy, it's got a large reservoir. This is a great container for a small tree or shrub. So I've got a crepe myrtle that needs to go in the garage all winter long. It's not hardy in this area. So I'm gonna grow the crepe myrtle in this particular container. The other container I got was by a company called Dynamic Design. I'm not as impressed with it. It's a little bit flimsy for my taste. I'm not sure that I would keep this outside, just knowing how aggressive I am in moving things back and forth. So obviously we need to put something in the containers in order to grow the plants, and that would be the soil. Container mix or potting mix is a great thing to use in your containers. Basically, when you buy these potting mixes, it's soil with added nutrients. You can make your own, so if you have garden soil, you just want to kind of loosen it up with some of the things that amend soil. So we have 3 of those things. These are mixed into garden soils to loosen them up and make them have better drainage, and that's real important for those containers. So if you look here, I've got a soil which I've been using in containers, but I want it a little bit looser for some of those succulents, so we're adding a lot of perlite in here right now, and you can see how much looser this soil is becoming. I highly encourage you to try almost anything in a container. You can grow small Japanese maple in a container, you can grow corn in a container. I've got tomatoes in containers. One of the important things is to put like-minded plants together. For example, we've got this nice little succulent container here. Those things like it on the drier side. Here I've got a container with a couple of different types of basil. That likes the same amount of light and the same amount of water. Then we have some of these perennials. These are coreopsis. If we're going to put these in a container, we'd want to put them with other perennials that like the same amount of water, or annuals that require the same amount of water as well as light. By putting those like-growing plants in the same container, it's going to make your life a lot easier, and the plants will be a lot healthier as well. Plants grown in containers are certainly going to need some fertilizer. You either have granular fertilizers or you have liquid fertilizers. You can add a little bit of compost to your mixes, but if you add too much, it tends to make the containers a little bit heavy. So I like to stick with rotating between the granular and the liquid fertilizer. If I'm using granular and I'm growing food, I like to go organic. If you're just growing a lot of flowers, some of the fertilizers that are made specifically for blooms are wonderful. The products you've seen today have been provided by Lowe's and are an opportunity to share some of the knowledge we have on containers with you. For Growing Wisdom, I'm Dave Epstein.